blue spoilers. Remember, we are covering limited and general. We're going to talk about draft ratings, sealed ratings, and if a card is particularly better or worse in Two-Headed Giant, or if there's any sort of special stuff to consider for that. Now, we're going to start with the hardest card to pronounce in the set, which is Abstruse Interference. You can go ahead and try to say that 5 times fast. Quite the tongue twister. But it's 2 and a blue for an instant. Devoid. Counter target spell, unless its controller plays 1. And you put a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion into play that sacrifices for a colorless mana. Now, I would like to go ahead and say Eldrazi Scions are worth more because colorless mana is a real asset. It is essentially a real color. It is the 6th color in many ways in the set, and you may have abilities that require it. So, whereas before you would never trade your 2/1 for an Eldrazi Scion, here you're much more likely to because it can cut them out for a color ability. They may not be able to use certain Eldrazi cards because they don't have colored mana. All that said, Abstruse Interference is not really playable at all. I'm not going to play it, and it's too hard to get my creature and a card countered when they only have to pay 1. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a D. Just a solid D. Card I almost hope to never play. Blinding Drone, however, is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 Eldrazi drone, and it's devoid. Colorless, tap target creature. That's a really strong effect. This is a really strong card. 1 and a blue for a 1/3 is okay. I will play that some amount of time. 1 and a blue for a 1/3 that taps cards is better than Blinding Mage, which is considered one of the best tappers that has ever been printed because of the toughness keeping it alive. And this card is terrifyingly strong. I think it's one of the best reasons to be in colorless. I will be snapping up as many as I can get. I'm rating it as a B- just because it is a 2-colored card essentially. You do have to have colorless sources. Colorless is like a light splash. It's not a full color edition, right? It's not like it's 1 and a blue, pay a green. But at the same time, it is a real cost, and how significant that cost is, we will not really know until we play more of the set. That said, Blinding Drone is one of the cards that pays you off for finding that balance. Cultivator Drone. 2 and a blue for a 2/3. Eldrazi Drone is devoid. Tap to add colorless to your mana pool. You can use this to only cast colorless spells, activate an ability of a colorless permanent, which is all the devoid cards, or pay a cost that contains a colorless symbol in it. Now, currently in that set, also only includes devoid and colorless cards. But what's really going on here is that this is adding a mana. So 2/3 for 2 is fine. 2/3 for 2 that gives you colorless access is strong as well. You don't need to pick this early, but this will be the enabler card for many of your Eldrazi cards and devoid spells. So I'd be picking this up somewhere in the middle, just like with processors and the exile effects, the ingest cards. I think this time you'll be picking the payoff cards first, and then more of the enablers, since the lands enable as well. But Cultivator Drone can be very powerful in that deck. I think overall it is a C, because 2/3 for 3 is fine. If you pick it up and you're not using the ability much, it's okay, but not great. But when you get to use that ability, it means quite a bit more. Deep Fathom Skulker is 5 and blue for a 4 for Eldrazi Devoid. That's okay, stats. I don't mind those. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. So when you play this card, you can attack with all your other creatures. If any of them deal damage, you draw that many cards. So this card, just with that part there, is already basically an A-. Like, it's just going to win you most games you play. It's going to draw you some amount of cards almost every time you play it. If you have any flyers or evasive cards, they're going to draw you cards. If you can attack with all your creatures, and they would be even trades, and 1 or 2 would get through, now all of a sudden they're all even trades, and you drew 2 or 3 cards. And you got a 4/4 body. And it has one more ability, which is 3 and a colorless. Target creature can't be blocked this turn. Wow, that is a super strong ability on this body. That means you can play it. Now, you probably won't have 10 mana, but if you do, you can immediately make sure one of your creatures hits and you draw a card. And then after that, Deep Fathom Skulker, just on its own, lets you hit for 4 and draw a card every turn if you don't have any other creatures. Which is going to help, find you ways to use your 6+ mana that you had before. So this is definitely an A-. It's not higher for me because it just wins you the game more than kind of stabilizes, and it's it's costed appropriately for this extremely strong effect. I will also say the target part is more important in something like Two-Headed Giant, where you can make your opponent's cards unblockable. They don't get to draw a card, but you can be in positions where you can just do enough damage to kill them. Dimensional Infiltrator is 1 in blue for a 2/1 Devoid Flying Flash at rare. 1 and a colorless. Target opponent exiles the top card of their library. If it's a land, you may return this card to its owner's hand. Now, the you may return is a big deal. You can pay 1 and a colorless to set up sort of cards that care about exile very easily. And if it's a land, you can protect it from other effects. So if you had 2 or 4 mana and you had to make a block, or your opponent tried to play a removal spell, you can try to kind of get out of jail free with your creature and return it to your hand, which is a strong effect. And a 2 mana 2/1 flyer is worth playing. A 2 mana 2/1 flyer with flash is worth playing. And a 2 mana 2/1 flyer that enables sort of exile effects and or can potentially protect itself is worth playing. But altogether, that card's still not super amazing. I'm not going to pick it super highly, and it's mostly just a 2/1 flying for 2. That's usually what you're going to play it as. So for me, it's a B-. I'm happy to have it, but it's nothing crazy. Gravity Negator is 3 in a blue for a 2/3 Flying Devoid Eldrazi Drone. When it attacks, you can pay colorless. If you do, another target creature gains flying. It's good. I would like to have a couple of these in my deck. I wouldn't want to have too many. I think 2 is actually where my limit's at. But the first one can be very powerful. It can get through creatures that couldn't normally get through. It does a decent job on defense with a 2/3 Bloody and flying, so it's going to stop a lot of other flyers there. And the fact that it can take another creature to the skies is a big deal as well. I'm going to go ahead and just give that a C, and know that it has diminishing returns after the first couple, just because you don't want too many low power and toughness creatures for a high mana cost. Prophet of Distortion is 1 for a 1/2 Devoid. It's an uncommon. You can pay 3 and a colorless to draw a card. So they want this card to be strong. Your opponent's going to want to kill it, but I don't know if it's doing enough. I mean, it's blocking 1/1s. It's blocking 1 powered creatures, but I don't want a 1/2 with a late game ability that isn't doing that much. I would have to care about colorless permanents to want to play this card. If you care about colorless permanents, the nice part is this is an okay draw late, right? You can pay 5 to play it, and immediately draw a card, and then later maybe draw another card, until you get the stuff you need. But for me, I just don't normally want to play 1/2s for 1. It's just not doing enough with my mana. I'm going to give this card a D+. It might have some homes that I'm not seeing, but it's not where I want to be at. Slip Through Space is 1 for a Devoid Sorcery. Target creature can't be blocked this turn. Draw a card. You can cast this on your opponent's cards. Two-Headed Giant. You can cast this on your partner's cards. So that's all fine and good. Drawing a card's a big deal. There's stuff that cares about colorless spells, and this is a cycling spell that does that, so it actually has a lot more power there. So this is a good offensive card, or if you get effects from playing colorless spells, it can be fine there too. It's just a C for me. The draw card is very, very strong. Remember that if you have a creature and they kill it in response, you don't get to draw the card, so there is that risk. Thought Harvester is 3 in a blue for a 2/4 Devoid Flying. Okay, that's good. I will play that card. I will be happy with that card. What's the rest of the text? Whenever you cast a colorless spell, target opponent exiles the top card of their library. Now, just exiling cards off the top of the library is not necessarily great or not great. It enables processing. It gives you some amount of information, but that's not a reason to play the card unless you're picking up the processing cards. I will say, when we played Triple Battle for Zendikar, you picked up the Ingestors and then the Processors. In this one, you're going to do 2 Oath of the Gatewatches. If you have a lot of exile effects, you can pick up processing cards fairly highly. There's actually a lot of ways to get cards exiled in this set with very little cost. But there's not really any payoff cards in Oath of the Gatewatch either. So overall, this card's probably like a C for me. I'm fine playing a 4 mana 2/4 flying. It's a good offensive and defensive card. It's solid. Might be a C+, but I'm going to keep it at a C. I really wouldn't want to run too terribly many of these. Void Shatter, 1 blue, instant, devoid, counter target spell. If it's countered this way, exile it instead of putting it in the graveyard. It's fine. I don't like running counter spells too much in Limited, And it's extra hard because the one blue, the double blue, is actually kind of tricky to get to unless you're very heavy blue. You'll usually pull this in from your sideboard more than anything else. I will also say in Two-Headed Giant that effects like counterspells are a little bit better because it's a little bit slower format. But overall, I'm usually not playing this in draft. About half and half, maybe a little bit more on sealed, and frequently in Two-Headed Giant. So for me, I think overall that makes this card like a C-. Ancient Crab, the oldest crabs. 1 blue for a 1/5 crab. The blue is tricky. If you're base blue, this card goes up quite a bit. For me, it's just like a really defensive, slow card that's a little hard to cast. I think I'd usually just rather have the 0/6 wall. It's harder to swarm around with the 1 power. It does attack. You can support onto it, which is a big deal. You know, you support once or twice with this. It's a 2/6. It's a 3/7. But for me, overall, I think that this card is a C-. I'm not too excited about playing it. If I'm heavy blue, I'll pick it a little bit higher. Alright, so we're into Surge. Surge is whenever you cast this spell, if you cast another spell, or a teammate did, you can cast it for a reduced cost, and sometimes for an increased effect. This one is 3 and a blue, instant, target player draws 2 cards. Surge, 2 and a blue, so you can just cast it for cheaper. Let's talk about the card first. First and foremost, I think that this card format is slow enough that you'll be happy to play it. The Surge for this card isn't particularly important. Your most common Surge is going to be turn 5, play a 2-drop Surge Comparative Analysis. Your 2-drop may be a burn spell or just a creature, and you do 2 cards, and that's pretty good. The target player part and the Surge part make it a very, very good card in Two-Headed Giant because you can make your opponent draw cards, or sorry, not your opponent. You can make your partner draw cards in case they're low on cards and you have plenty, and you can just have your partner cast their normal 3-drop, and then you can just Surge your Comparative Analysis to really get ahead. I think Surge overall is an extremely strong ability in the Two-Headed Giant, and I think in most of your normal decks, you're just not really going to build a Surge deck in Limited or Sealed too often, because it's hard to have multiple cards playing and stringing together unless you have a very steady string of card advantage. Containment Membrane, 2 and a blue, enchant creature. Enchanted creature does untap during its controller's unstap step. Surge for a blue. So this is one of the Surge cards I actually like quite a bit. I would play 2 and a blue, enchanted creature does untap. That's blue removal. It's okay. And the fact that you can sometimes play it for just a single blue, right? Let's say on turn 4, I play my 3-drop. I can just Surge this for 1. I really like that. It's a card I'm happy to pay 3 for. It's a card I'm ecstatic to pay 1 for. I think blue got the best Surge cards. I'd probably give this a C. I'm not going to run a ton of these. There are some cards that don't care about untapping, or your opponent's going to play defensive, etc., etc. But the first 1 or 2 is really good. Alright, Crush of Tentacles is 4 blue. Return all sorcery. Return all non-land permanents to the owner's hand. Surge, 3 blue, so it's cheaper. And if the Crush of Tentacles Surge cost was paid, you get an 8/8 Octopus. So most of the Surge cards you're not going to try to Surge particularly. It doesn't matter if you play them or Surge them, it's just when you need to play them. Cards like Crush of Tentacles, you're going to try to Surge. For cards, if I had a Crush of Tentacles on my deck, I would be more likely to run more 1 and 2 drops. I'd try to find space for them because they would make my card stronger. Being able to, on turn 6, play my 1-drop, Surge for 5, get my 8/8, be way ahead is a big deal. And there'll be a couple other Surge cards that we'll see where you'll also really want to Surge because of the power effect. Containment Membrane, like we said, is a C. Crush of Tentacles is the kind of card that's, in my opinion, A-. It kind of clears the board out. It is a little expensive, but the fact that you can just win the game off of it also is what pushes it up. Like, if it was just returning everything in its hand, it would be like a B. It would be powerful, but not necessarily a game ender. But this card can completely change the game. Your opponent can be very far ahead with the mini creatures. You can play a 1-drop and Surge this on the same turn, and then boom, all of a sudden, your opponent's way on the back foot. They need to cast multiple spells. They have to deal with an 8/8, and you have some serious tentacle beef going on. That's my tentacle move. This is Tentacles. Alright, just clarifying what tentacles are. Alright guys, Cyclone Sire is 4 and a blue for a 3/4 flying. That is already a good card. Like, I'm sold on that. I like that card. That card is like a C+. I'm going to play that card all the time. But this card's better. When it dies, you may... It's an elemental. When it dies, you may put 3/1/1 counters on a land you control. It becomes a elemental creature with haste. Now, when it dies, it gets bigger is a little bit odd in some ways because your opponent can play this after you... Or kill it after it's already attacked, so the haste is a little bit less good than normal, but that's not really that big of a deal. It's a 5 mana 3/4 flyer that turns into a 3/3. That's pretty crazy. This card's a B+ for me. It's a card they have to answer twice. It's a terrifying card they have to answer. It's super strong. I think it is probably one of the best uncommons that we can see as far as finishers go. Gift of Tusks is a really amusing card. It is 1 instant. Till end of turn, target creature loses all of its abilities and becomes a green elephant with base power and toughness 3/3. Now, there are 2 things going on with this card. Number 1, your opponent attacks with Ulamog, and it becomes Ulamog the Elephant, which is just a 3/3. And that means it doesn't have any abilities. It's not indestructible anymore. You can just block with your 4/4 and kill Ulamog, because he turned into an elephant. That's pretty cool. Now, I will say, for the exact Ulamog example, they will get to exile your card still, because that trigger went on before they attacked, because they wouldn't attack with a 3/3. And I actually have to look up to know if it loses its graveyard ability or not. I think that it is put into the graveyard and it has already regained those abilities, so it should be recycled in. I have to actually check on that one. Sorry for not knowing that, guys. But that is Gift 1, a Gift of Tusk's main point. It's a removal spell. Here's something else cool you can do. This is my 2/2. Or my Eldrazi sign became a 3/3. Blocked your 2/2, killed it. Oh, that's cool too. But that's not the coolest one. The coolest one is when my 3/3 land, or my 0/0 land with 3/1/1 counters, becomes a 3/3 elephant, has 3/1/1s, is a 6/6, blocks your creature, is awesome. Or where my creature that is a 2/2 with 2/1/1 counters from support becomes a 5/5 and blocks better there too. So it's a good defensive combat trick as well, making your creatures bigger. Alright, we got T Murda, and they said they had a question. T Murda, go ahead with your question, and I'll go into the next card while you're asking it, and I'll be answering it as soon as you get it there. Gift of Tusk's rating, by the way, I think is somewhere like... I'm not going to pick it that highly. It does require some amount of work. It is a blue removal spell, but you do need creatures and other stuff, so for me it's just a C, even though it is an instant speed combat trick in many ways. You can also just attack for more with it too, but that's, you know, obvious. You can make your 1/1 attack for 3 or whatever. Grip of the Royal is 2 and a white for an instant. Tap target creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. Draw a card. That card is playable, but it's not great. It's an okay defensive card. It's an okay card to get through some damage. But the real issue I have is that it does cost some amount of mana. Now, it does Surge. It does have Surge for 2. It's a small difference in it. I will usually play the first one of these because the draw card spell means that it replaces itself. So what the card actually has to do to be worth the card is worth much less. But the Surge is actually much worse in some ways because it's harder to Surge instants to get the value out of the Surge necessarily. So you usually be playing this for 3 on their turn or 2 on yours or 3 on yours or whatever. I'm going to give it a C+ because I'm usually going to play it. Alright, so Murda had a question. If I cast a spell for its awaken cost and someone counters it, do I still have the ability to put the counters on my land since I'm targeting 2 targets? Okay, there's 2 things Murda's asking here. I'm going to tell you both of the situations. I have a land. I play a card like... We'll use 2 examples. I'm playing a card that just targets the land... let me pull up the spoiler real quick. Sorry, guys. Let's go ahead and pull up MTG Salvation. I need an actual example so I can show you guys real quick, and then we'll go right back to the spoiler. Oh, it's off the Gatewatch. Other spoilers. Battle for Zendikar. Some of them, like the one where you take an extra turn. Are you gonna... Does this... Oh my gosh. Alright. I'll just explain it. the ones that have multiple targets. So if I had an Awakened card that said one of my, like Royal Spout. Royal Spout makes their creature go back to their hand and makes my creature bigger. If they kill their creature or sacrifice their creature in response or kill my creature, but just one of those, and I have one legal target, the rest of the spell resolve. I'll either get a bigger creature or the creature will go back. If the card has no legal targets, so like the one with Part the Water Veil, where it's take an extra turn, and the target of the land gets the 6/1/1 counters if they volcanic if they exile my land in response, then I don't get to take the extra turn because there's no legal targets. Now, if I cast a spell, Part the Water Veil, and my opponent plays a cancel on my Part the Water Veil to counter that spell, I do not get the 1/1 counters because the spell itself is countered. If you counter the actual spell with a card like Counterspell, like we had, what? I can't find it. Well, the Counterspell that was up there. Oh, we haven't gotten the Counterspell yet. But, or maybe we did. I can't quite remember. If they actually counter your actual spell, then none of the effects happen. If they try to make your spell have illegal targets, if they remove all the targets, the spell doesn't do anything that's non-targeted. If the spell has 2 targets and they get rid of 1, it does as much as it can for the single target. Did that answer your question, Murda? I hope it did. If not, I'll just send you a message in just a moment. But first we're going to get to, Hedron Alignment, which is 2 and a blue and basically unplayable. It's an enchantment. It has hexproof, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if you reveal your hand, you win the game if you have one in play in the graveyard, in exile, and on the battlefield. So you need 4 of them, which isn't going to happen. And you need them in lots of different zones, which definitely isn't going to happen. So it's really 2 and a blue for a hexproof, 1 and a blue scry 1 card. And I would not play that card. Ever. Because I do not want to scry for 2 mana over and over. I need like 5 or 4 scries on average for it to be worth a card. So I have to put in like 11 mana to get a card? That does not sound great. Yeah, Kim Joshua, I'm going to do all of the colors. We're on blue right now. Each one I'm going to take a tiny, tiny break in between, like 30 seconds, and change the title on it. We already did white. I'll actually be posting these all up to our YouTube, Mobius Pick at YouTube, or Mobius Pick on YouTube, and we'll get them there. Oh, my stream had a second on downtime. All right, remember one more time on how Awaken cards work. If the Awaken card has 2 targets, like Royal Spout, it has the creature for your 1/1. You're Royal Spouting their creature, and you're Awakening your creature. If they kill your land in response, you still bounce their card. If they kill their creature in response, you still get the counters on your card. If it's a single card, target card, like Part the Water Veil, and you have your card, if you just cast it without awakening it, they can't destroy target to counter it. If you have your creature and it would get its 6/1/1 counters, and they kill your creature, you don't get to take the extra turn. If you play any Awaken spell, and they play a cancel to cancel your spell, then you get nothing. You get no Awaken or anything else. So it depends on how many targets there are. As long as there is 1 legal target, it will do everything it can. Alright, but going back onto this, Jawar Isle Avenger is 4 and a blue for a 3/3 Sphinx. Now this isn't an ally, it's just a Sphinx. That said, 4 and a blue for a 3/3 is acceptable. It's not great by today's standards. Just 4 and a blue for a 3/3, I think the card would be a C. I would run one of them. But it has Surge for 2 and a blue. I think this is one of the more important Surge cards because there'll be a lot of situations where you'll have being played different cards throughout the game, and you have 2-drops and 3-drops in different cards, so you play your 2-drop or 3-drop, and then on turn 4 you play a different spell, and you have a Jawar Isle Avenger in hand. Well, you can now play your 2-drop and the Jawar Isle Avenger. You will always want to cast the card because it's always going to make an important impact on the board. I think this is one of the best Surge cards. I think it's going to be very strong. In 2-headed Giant, it's just ridiculous. You're almost always going to play it on turn 3, and a consistent 3/3 for 3 with flying is insane. And that's what this card is in 2-headed Giant, almost always. So play all of those you can in 2-headed Giant. It is a legit bomb in 2-headed Giant. In normal stuff, it is basically a C. I don't know, maybe it's a C+. It's hard to exactly figure out where the mana costs are going to go, but if I saw these early, I would be happy to have like 3 of them in my deck, and I know that seems like a lot, but you can very easily get to a position where these are your only 3 5-drops in your deck, or maybe you have one more large card, and very consistently you're playing 2 drops and 3 drops, and then on turn 5, you're playing 2-drop Jawar Isle Avenger, putting 2 bodies out, putting a lot of pressure on. I think it's going to be very good in the blue-red deck, which I think will be the one that takes the most advantage of Surge. Negate, 1 in the blue, counter target non-creature spell, instant. I'm going to usually play this in Sealed. I'm going to usually play this in Two-Headed Giant. I'm going to usually keep this on my board otherwise. It's just a sideboard card in Draft, and I think it's fine to main board the first one in Sealed formats. It doesn't really get a rating so much because it's a sideboard card. Alright, so we're back to the Oath. Remember the Planeswalker part, not particularly important. We're looking for the essentially sorcery effect, which is 2 in a blue for Legendary Enchantment. Oath of Jace. Enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards, discard 2 cards. So you looked at 3 cards and got to get no significant advantage. It is decent filtering, and you're not necessarily down a card, you're even. If you're looking for specific things or there's specific cards, it's a little bit more powerful. There's not really graveyard effects in Limited here, so I don't think it's great. But if you're a more controlling deck, it's fine, just because, you know, with it and the 3 cards you drew and the 2 cards you discarded, you didn't gain or lose any cards. So you get a look at 3, which is decent. It's a C- for me, but when it has a home, it'll be better than that. Overwhelming Denial is 2 blue-blue for an instant. It can't be countered, and counter target spell. Search for blue-blue. I don't think this card's great. I would rather play the 1 blue-blue counter spell. You're almost never going to surge it. It not being able to be countered doesn't really matter. So I'm down on Overwhelming Denial, and I'm overwhelmingly denying it. For me, it's a D-, a card I'm never going to play if I can make it, or a D, actually. Roiling Waters is 5 blue-blue for a sorcery. It's going to bring some beef. It's an uncommon, too, so it is set up for Limited specifically. Return up to 2 target creatures your opponents control to their owner's hands. Target player draws 2 cards. This is very powerful. Let's talk about it first in Two-Headed Giant. You should play it. It's powerful. It's a game-winning card. You're going to be happy with it every time. Bouncing 2 cards is a big deal. It's a big tempo gain. You or your partner can draw 2 cards. Let's talk about it in Sealed. I feel the same. It's a powerful card. The games are going to go longer. This is a slower format. You can return 2 cards. You're essentially forcing your opponent. They're probably going to have to recast one of the cards on their turn and then the other card the next turn. So it's going to take them 2 cards to build that board back, and you drew 2 cards, so it replaced itself, and you gained 1, and you bought yourself time. In Draft, I do not like this card. It's a card I'm going to bring out of my sideboard. I want more out of my 7 mana cards than just time, because it's so hard to get to 7 mana. So Sealed and Two-Headed Giant, I think this card is great, and you should almost always play it. In Draft, I think it's like a C-, D+. It's really hard to get to that amount of mana. It does give you a fairly strong effect, but it doesn't even necessarily win you the game for that effect, which is a little bit of count against it. Sphinx of the Final Word is 5 blue-blue for a 5/5. It can't be countered. It's not particularly important. Flying Hexproof. It's pretty solid. Instants and sorcery spells can't be countered that you control. Or instant sorcery spells you control can't be countered by spells or abilities. Not particularly important. So it's a 5/5 for fly. It's a flying hexproof 5/5 for 7. I'll run that sometimes out of my sideboard. I'm never going to mainboard it just because that's not very efficient. And I'd really rather not, and 7's a lot to ask for that. It is a powerful card, and if your deck's going very, very late, then it is stronger. In Draft, I would usually rather run Sphinx of the Final Word than Roiling Waters, just because I'm more likely to be able to win the game with a 5/5 than bouncing 2 cards and drawing a card. Like, Roiling Waters is buying you more time to get to more powerful cards, but in Draft, how many powerful slow cards can you run? Not that many. Sphinx of the Final Word is the slow, powerful card that you're trying to run. It is a 5/5 flyer for 5. It is going to usually do the things you need it to do. It is basically unkillable by your opponent's spells and by most combat situations. So, it's fine there. For me, it is, again, a D+. I'm not going to pick it highly. I'm not going to play it highly in draft. It's great in sealed and in two-headed giant. Alright, Sweep Away is 2 and a blue. Instant, return target creature to its hand. If it's attacking, put it on top of its owner's library instead. Very strong card. You can use it when you're on the offense to just bounce a creature out of the way and get through the damage you'd like. But on defense, it sets them back a whole turn. I think this card is a solid C+. I think it's going to do a ton of great work for you. Remember, it kills tokens outright because, you know, they don't go back to hands or top libraries. If they leave the battlefield, they're gone forever. But you can make your opponent redraw land. Let's say they're attacking with a land creature. You can put that land back on top of their deck. The land is no longer a creature. And you made sure their next draw step is a land that they lost the turn for playing. So you set them back a land drop. And they lost a creature. And they essentially lost a draw step. It's awesome. The only thing I want to give sort of forewarning to about a card like this is that in two-headed giant, it's worth half a draw step because each draw step, each player draws a card. So they essentially draw 2 cards, and this removes half of that. It's still a powerful card. It's still worth playing. It's just slightly less powerful there overall. I think this card is a C+. You can play around it somewhat, but it is so strong, and you can just play them over and over. I would probably play 3 of these in my deck. I'd be happy to see each one. They're all going to provide this really strong effect. It might be a B-. I don't know. It's hard to say. This is the premium blue removal in this set. Umara Entangler. 1 and a blue for a 2/1. Merfolk Rogue Ally with Prowess. Prowess is a fine ability. I don't think it's as easy to use in this format. You do need to use a Prowess card to get a card up because it has 1 toughness. You really have to play 2 spells for it to really start surviving combat, but it can trade pretty well at just the first spell. It's a C- for me. Unity of Purpose. 3 and a blue. Instant support 2. This is, I think, the only blue support card. Untap each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it. The untap part's cool. The support 2 part is fine as well, because it's going to let you essentially untap any 2 creatures you want, plus any of the other ones with untap ones as well. If you're playing a 1/1 counter-based deck, this card is more powerful, but even on its own, it's fine. It's a decent trick, and blue doesn't usually have those, so that counts for a lot, you know, but I'm not excited about playing it. It's like a C- to me overall. It will catch people off guard being blue if you're in some sort of like... I mean, the real problem is every other color has good combat tricks except for blue for the most part, so they're going to be playing around the other ones. As far as really big bombs in blue, I think blue is a stronger color overall. Blinding Drone makes up for a lot of that strength. The fact that it's a common that does so much. It does require colorless, and colorless is a main color synergy with blue. So make sure that you think about that when you're going into blue, that you may need some colorless sources as well. Fortunately, you have things like Cultivator Drone to provide that. Bombs like Deep Fathom Skulker. And some powerful draw kind of effects and exile effects. This is a good... If you're in blue, Eldrazi, think about maybe picking up some processing cards in the last set because so many of your cards exile. And if you are playing sort of blue cards, you've mini surge cards, remember to have a curve that can take advantage of your surge cards, which will also be a tricky part, is figuring out how do you balance your surge cards with the converted mana cost with the total power. Because playing 2 spells is very powerful in the same turn, which is what Surge is trying to do. But yeah, overall, I think I do like blue. I think it's more of a support color than a main color, but that's alright. Alright, guys, we're about to go on to black.